And then I ended up, this map is actually made by someone who was chasing me. It's not entirely accurate, but essentially I went to St. Louis with the band. I took a train down to New Orleans, and then I rented an office in New Orleans, and I rented it under a fake name. I signed a lease. And I would do things like I had anonymous PayPal accounts, or not anonymous, but attached to my fake name. And I would contact the landlord over the internet and ask them if they took PayPal. So sometimes I rent an apartment for a week, and I never even saw the landlord. He just left me a key in a box. I paid him with PayPal. As far as he knew, I was James Gatz, and as long as I paid the bill, he didn't care. So then the other dilemma I had was my pictures were in the magazine, and not only in the magazine, but every day Wired was publishing more and more pictures. I had given them essentially a dossier of information about me, this same kind of thing that an investigator would uncover if they spent some time interviewing my family and things like that. So I had to kind of disguise my physical appearance because I didn't know if anyone I had encountered along the way might have seen the magazine, and anyone could catch me. So all they had to do was have seen the magazine, know the code word, and take my picture. So I wanted to do a little bit to mask my physical appearance. So at first I grew out this kind of like scraggly beard. This is the first day. Then I shifted towards, this is my Las Vegas look. So these are fake glasses, and I dyed my hair, and I dyed the goatee as well, and I kind of slicked it back. And I had, this is from the end, and it's you can't see it that well, but I had 4 pairs of fake glasses, sunglasses. I had multiple different kinds of contacts, hats, all the stuff I was kind of carrying with me, along with enough digital gear to kind of stock a Radio Shack, basically. I had throwaway phones. I had different ways to access the internet, and all this stuff I was sort of carrying along with me. So then here I am in Los Angeles, and I actually got into a man on the street video. And at the time, swine flu there was a big swine flu scare, and there was a woman who does an online news report who was going around Venice Beach asking people, what do you think about swine flu? And I thought, well, this will be a really funny thing for me to get into, and then later I can say, see, I wasn't hiding out from the world. Here I was. I was on Venice Beach. Not only that, but I was in this video, and this video was published online, and she has a lot of fans. I was out there to be found. So then this is me in New Orleans. I've got my hat. I've washed out the dye by this point. And then I started building up a lot of paranoia, even starting in LA. In fact, one of the things that's in the final story is that I actually ran from a helicopter one day on Venice Beach because I had used my ATM card to deposit the check from my selling the car, because this was like a cashier's check, and I didn't want to lose it. I mean, it was $3,000, which it's not something you want to just not be careful with. So I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and deposit this. I was leaving LA anyway. I don't care if they know that I've used this ATM. But then I couldn't get out as quickly as I wanted to. I couldn't get my ride out of LA. So basically one morning I was out on the beach. There was a helicopter. It was kind of hovering over me. And I thought, well, that's weird. And then I kind of moved down the beach, and it kind of moved down the beach. And I thought, well, there's nothing else going on this beach. It was 6 in the morning. I was out for a jog. There were a few surfers out. And then I thought, you know what? Someone has seen this ATM thing. They've posted it online, and they've gotten a friend who has a helicopter. And they're coming out to get me, because for $5,000, you pay the friend a few hundred for using the helicopter, and you're still making good money. So I started running. And then the helicopter really started following me, because there's this guy on the beach probably sprinting as fast as he can across the beach, and that's really something you want to check out. So I actually ran from this helicopter and then ran up and down all these streets and then got out of LA that day. So anyway, long story short, I was paranoid through a lot of this. So I decided to go with more extreme disguises, which was this. So I shaved the top of my head. I went with the mustache, and you can see I'm wearing the colored contacts, so I have blue eyes, and my eyes are brown in that. And this was my kind of businessman look, and I used this especially. I took one flight. Well, I took 2 flights, but I flew one place, and I had to use my real ID because I didn't want to mess with using a fake ID, obviously, on airplanes post 9/11. So I went with this kind of businessman. I wore a tie, and at the airport, the only person who's going to look at my ID was going to be the TSA person. And if you've flown at all, you know the TSA people don't actually pay that close attention to the photo on your driver's license. So I made it through with this disguise. So that's all the stuff that I was doing. And then the question is, what was everyone else doing? You know, what were the people trying to find me doing? And the first thing they did was they kind of spontaneously organized online. They created these organic communities of people who were looking for me. So this is the Facebook page that they created, I think, on the first day. And after about 24 hours, there were 1,000 members of this Facebook group. And what they were trying to do was develop ways to coordinate, because they had a problem in that even if they knew where I was, unless they wanted to lay out money to come find me, if I wasn't close to them, it was going to be very difficult to find me because I could be anywhere in the country. But if they collaborated, then if one person had the information about where I was, they could contact someone who was closer to where I was and give it a shot. And that's what they were doing. People one guy took off in the middle of the night and drove all the way to Vegas from San Diego when there were signs that I might be in Vegas and missed me actually by a couple of days. So then they also got on Twitter, and this was kind of the hub of where they were exchanging information back and forth, whether it was things that were put out by Wired, things that were from my accounts, or things that they discovered online. So by the end of the day, on the first day, they're digging into everything they could find about me online. They're also digging into databases that some people have access to, like LexisNexis and ChoicePoint. So by the end of, I think, 24, 36 hours, every address that I'd ever lived at was published online. Someone had already found them all and put them all out there. And I had moved a lot of time, so this was a dozen addresses that were all there. And then they made wanted posters, which they would put up in places where they thought that I might be going. One of the things that was part of the information that Wired put out about me was that I have something called celiac disease, which means that I have to eat a gluten-free diet. And so these were all over gluten-free cafes in Seattle and restaurants that catered to gluten-free people. And even the morning that I ran from the helicopter, when they eventually did discover I was in LA, they went out to several restaurants that they thought I might be located at and actually scoured those restaurants looking for me. So this is a map that someone made of points of interest, of places. It's got every address I lived at on there. It's got, I think it's got my family's address on there. It's got some work-related stuff. But one thing that interests me is if you look at the bottom, I don't know if you can read it, but it has call car collision, and Lily's Pet Care, which are actually things that people found out that I had reviewed online. So I'd gone on this website called Yelp, and thinking that it was pseudo-anonymous, I had actually reviewed, not really even thinking about the consequences of it or anything. I just reviewed the person who cat sits my cat. And this woman got dozens of calls from people who had gone and found that that's what I had reviewed. Now, I'm not a big reviewer of online things, but if you think about it, if you were, and then you disappeared, you've actually left an entire map of the things you like and don't like, which would be an incredibly valuable tool for an investigator. And then this is actually like a network diagram that someone made of both the IP addresses, which are at the very bottom, and again, this is very early on, and it's got credit card expenses on there. And then they did things like not just looking online, doing searches, which they were incredibly good at, but there were also investigators, informative investigators who were involved. And they used very tried and true investigative techniques, which were just calling people over and over again. So if they wanted to find out a piece of information, and they were supposed to, by the rules of the contest, not break the law as well, they would just call and ask for it. So if they wanted to know about a FedEx package that was on my credit card, they would just call FedEx and say, I want to know where this package was sent to or from. And the FedEx person would say, well, are you this person? And they would say, no. And they would say, well, I can't tell you that. They would hang up, they would call, and they would get the next person. And they would ask the same questions. But eventually, they would find some person who answered the phone who would just give it to them, which is really perfectly legal. And they did the same thing with my IP addresses. I mentioned I had this office in Las Vegas. I had the computers in it. Eventually, they found out the IP address for that office, but an IP address only correlates to a few city blocks. And so you need to get access to the actual internet service provider in order to find out where the specific address is. And a kid from Portland, a 17-year-old kid who got really obsessed with trying to find me. He started calling that internet service provider, and eventually a technician said, oh yeah, that's 2465 South Pecos Road. And then they had my address. Now, fortunately, I had a contingency plan for that, but it just goes to show that it's not actually, when I started out, I thought the issue was all the information that we put out online, which is true, which is an issue, when it comes to privacy. But, if you're actually worried about the information that corporations have and how they use it, they're not keeping quite as tight a tabs on it as you might expect. And then the last thing I'll show is this is my cat. And the reason I was showing this is that, so this is posted on Flickr, public photo site. I have a page on Flickr where I post pictures of my cat and other things. But what someone did was they actually took the pictures on Flickr and they stripped out the information about the camera that they were taken with. And then they created a little program, a little piece of software that had an algorithm that essentially scoured Flickr looking for other pictures taken with that camera. The idea being that if I was out there with this same camera taking pictures and posting them anonymously, then they could turn up my location by finding pictures. Fortunately, I didn't actually take that camera with me. So, but you'll see even the name of the camera is actually taken with. There it is right there. So then I was settled in New Orleans. I had this apartment rented. I was paranoid, but I was feeling pretty good about how I was doing. I was getting up to day 20, day 23, day 25. Meanwhile, there was one guy, his name is Jeff Reifman, he lives in Seattle. He used to work at Microsoft. And he now has this thing where he builds Facebook applications. They're like web pages within Facebook. And the purpose of these is actually to organize people around news. And he read the story, and he saw the disappearance contest. And he said, well, this is a good way to attract attention for my new venture. So he created this thing called Vanish Team. So he built this, it lives inside of Facebook, and it had all kinds of information about my disappearance. And it has a map, and people annotated the map, and people were exchanging clues. But after a while, people stopped coming to it a little bit, and he wasn't getting anywhere, and he kept having these theories about where I was, and they weren't correct. But then he decided he could do something else with it, which is he could lure me to this page and then try to capture my IP address when I visited the page. And the way he did that was he added this code. And this code right here, all it does is, if someone visits his Facebook page, they have to be logged into Facebook. When they are, it captures their IP address and their Facebook profile. So here he has this list, everybody that's visited my page, which was hundreds of people a day. But he could sort them. So he could say, all right, give me all of the people who have less than 30 friends. That's what he did at the beginning, and he figured, if this guy's got a fake Facebook page, he can't have that many friends. So I had outwitted him at first. I had 30 or 40, and he didn't find me in the first couple of days. And then he bumped it up to 50. And he looked through every single person visiting his page that had less than 50 friends. And then he came across this, which is my page, which he recognized because I had been in that Man on the Street video. And since then, I hadn't changed my photograph. So then he knows, this is me. He knows when I'm visiting his Facebook application. And then he knows my IP address because he has that piece of code that captures it, which I think technically at the time was against Facebook's terms of service for him to even do that. But he had an advantage, which is that I didn't actually know that he could do that. I didn't know that he could build something inside Facebook without their permission to capture IP addresses. So that in combination with the fact that I was getting a little bit lazy after 25 days because the method that I'd set up to access the internet anonymously took forever. So it was incredibly slow. So I started paring down the number of websites I visited using my anonymous methods. So then I hit his page, he gets my IP address, he starts following me around, and then I'll sort of condense the end of the story, but he had a problem, which is that he had to find people on the ground to capture me, because I was in New Orleans, he was in Seattle, and he used this piece of information that had come out that I have celiac disease, that I eat a gluten-free diet, and he contacted the only gluten-free pizzeria in all of New Orleans. There's one. It's called Naked Pizza. And he knew that I would probably end up eating there, which was true, but they actually did it one better, which is that Naked Pizza got so into catching me that they gave my photo to all of their delivery people, all of their employees, and then they scoured the city looking for me. And so eventually,
how did they know you like pizza?
I think that came out too. I think that came out in an interview that that they did with a friend of mine.